650 WEST, 51 West, downtown Elegance, unforgettable events.
Day and Genda Funeral Home is committed to putting family first. Our family will go above and beyond to love and care for your family with compassion and empathy. When loss comes into your life, come where you are loved like family. Day and Genda Funeral Home, putting family first.
Former WNBA star Katie Douglas Poe is now the owner of fitness franchises that help people get healthier and more active. And even though she comes from the world of elite athletics, Katie's favorite customers are the ones pursuing modest goals. We're proud to provide her with that same kind of personal support and individual attention to her finances, which is why, when it comes to her banking, Katie is a farmer. The Farmers Bank. Let's grow.
Arborwood by Shoups, the perfect location for any of life's unique moments. With beautifully manicured gardens, original 1920s architecture, and a variety of wedding and catering packages, Arborwood is sure to make your event a timeless experience. Go to arborwoodbyshoups.com to ensure your particular event is the event of a lifetime.
What started with a dream is now a heritage of philanthropy, and today the Community Foundation is helping donors make our communities a better place every day. With your support, we can do more. What do you want your legacy to be? Visit CF Howard, CF Clinton, or cfcarroll.org.
No matter the project, Stone Alley Hardware and Industrial Supply has the tools you need to get the job done. From power tools and fasteners to lubricants, safety equipment, and accessories, they've got the gear for every job. Trusted brands like Milwaukee, DeWalt, Makita, and more. Whether you're a contractor, farmer, mechanic, or DIYer, Stone Alley has what you need. Visit Stone Alley in-store on State Road 28 next to Circle Supply, or find them online at stonealleyinc.com. Get the job done right with Stone Alley.
Layton's Furniture and Mattress, one of the oldest running furniture stores in Indiana, serving since 1946. While many things have come and gone since then, Layton's, an official Lazy Boy dealer, is committed to ensuring quality is not just a goal, but a guarantee. Stop into 2 North Main Street in Frankfort and let the Layton family help make your house a home with both the latest trends and timeless designs. Copper Electric Service LLC has over 30 years experience, licensed, bonded, and insured, serving Boone, Clinton, Carroll, Tippecanoe, White, and Montgomery counties. Residential jobs, both large and small. Electric car charging stations to landscape lighting. Visit copperelectricservicellc.com or call 765-379-5056.
Are you searching for a trusted local jeweler? Look no further. Visit Ellis Jewelers on the Square in downtown Frankfort. From beautiful jewelry, watches, and clocks to jewelry cleaning, repair, custom design, and restyling, Ellis does it all. Engraving, appraisal, or evaluation, Ellis Jewelers is here to help.
Ellis Jewelers, where your love story begins.
Good evening. When you're up here, I can't see any of you guys, so I guess that's a good thing. My name's Deborah Pearson, and it's my privilege tonight to welcome you to tonight's speaker. This has been a series event that he started, and he did the first day as a radio program on Party Line, and then we had Friday, he did an appetizer for tonight, and tonight he's going to give you the full thing. And we're featuring Dr. Thomas Pearcy. He's a distinguished historian and researcher whose career spans more than 3 decades, but is it 4? 4 decades of scholarship, teaching, and international collaboration. Dr. Pearcy earned his PhD in Latin American history from the University of Miami, following his MA and BA from Purdue University. His academic journey has taken him from Brigham Young University to Slippery Rock University, where he is currently serves as professor of history. His work has also extended internationally with teaching and research appointments at the University of Panama and collaborations with institutes across Latin America. Throughout his career, Dr. Pearcy has explored the intersections of political history, intelligence, and democracy, including his joint work as a historian for the U.S. Department of State and the Central Intelligence Agency. His courses, ranging from JFK assassination to political violence in Latin America, reflect his deep commitment to uncovering truth through vigorous historical inquiry. He is also the founder of Historians Without Borders, an initiative dedicated to preserving factual history and combating prejudice throughout collaborative scientific scholarship. Tonight's presentation, Plausible Deniability in Our Democracy, invites us to examine how secrecy, power, and public trust intersect with what those intersections mean for democratic societies. Drawing from his extensive research and firsthand experience, Dr. Pearcy will guide us through the mechanisms that allow governments to act without accountability and the consequences those mechanisms have for citizens. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Thomas L. Pearcy.
It is an honor to be in my hometown with a room full of people that I love. Tonight I'm not going to talk about who killed Kennedy. We already know that. We have an answer, a very specific documented answer, and I'm going to save some time after I finish doing what I'm doing. I will openly answer any question that you have. If I don't know, I will tell you, but I will not be espousing my opinion tonight. I will be talking about things I've worked with my entire life. Now, in a classroom, it's usually best to start out serious topics with humor. And my students, if you go on ratemyprofessor.com, you will see that they understand that I'm bat manure crazy old person, but I love what I do. So I give you some CIA humor. Actually, classified CIA humor, but it shouldn't be classified. And yes, this is being filmed, and that's good. I was sitting in a special compartmented information facility in the just blackest site in all of the Western Hemisphere. And I had all of the clearances necessary to work with anything. The CIA could not deny me clearance. I worked for the government. So I'm sitting there one day going through some records relating to Mexico. And I am laughing so hard and laying on the floor laughing inside this black site. And this is not a place where people laugh. They're dead serious. I am howling at the moon. I'm reading this after-action report. Washington notified Winscott, the CIA Mexico City station chief, that a meeting of communists was going to occur in the area. And the station was ordered to disrupt this. Now, when I started reading this, I thought, this is not going to end nicely. But Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who was the director of the CIA's scientific research, he was their lead scientist and did some really horrific things. He created for this, well, first agents went out and advanced the place to see what the site was. And it looked like a bowling alley in the United States, a long, narrow building. There was a dais at one end where people would speak, and it would seat 2,000 people. How to disrupt this? Dr. Gottlieb, up in Washington, created what one might call a violent turbolax. I mean, the kind of laxative that gives you about 45 seconds before you lose all control of your bowels. And, and they drill pinholes and put cameras in them so that you can watch. There's only one bathroom in the entire facility, and it's right stage, right about here. So anyone who's going to the bathroom is going to, let's say, stand out, right? Now, the funny part was, as is the case in some parts of the Western Hemisphere, there's a gas station across about 8 lanes of traffic that has a bathroom. Now, the traffic in Mexico is fun. I mean, because there are no rules. You just go. And there's this bathroom, and it doesn't appear that the after-action report was just, like I said, I'm howling. There hasn't been any water in the toilet for years, but it's been used, if you understand what I'm saying. Kind of a step ladder, and a nose pin. And so they drilled a pinhole camera looking out, and they drilled a pinhole camera looking in. And they bribed the Mexican team that was catering this event, and they put in this violent laxative. I'm just petulant enough that this has got me on the ground howling, So the speaker starts up, and the place is full, and you can see the waiters going from the back to the front and the front to the back, because there are, after all, 2,000 people. And I mean, it isn't 4 or 5 minutes when you start seeing people, trying to keep the barn door closed so the animals don't get out. And then they're doing the Robin Williams duck walk. They're trying very hard to not do what they really, really have to do biologically. And it's 1, and then 10, and then 20, and then hundreds, and they're soiling themselves on the way to the bathroom. I'm watching the film, and I mean, my feet are up in the air. I'm laughing. CIA personnel come in to see what awful thing I've done, Anyway, the camera caught people doing the duck walk, trying to do the duck walk while staying alive, dodging traffic going in that direction. And they're all similarly, how do we say this politely, not successful. Or one might say very successful if you're looking from the point of view of the CIA. So the after-action report was very sterile. And we're happy to report that we disrupted the meeting. Yeah, you kind of did. So the next day, it's a 2-day thing, Gottlieb provided this ridiculously aggressive itching powder, knowing that somebody who's had a laxative on steroids is probably going to be interested in where the restroom's at the following day. So the operators went in there and just absolutely covered the toilet facility with itching powder. And sure enough, you see people, I mean, it's much less of a train wreck that the day had been before, but let's just say they're anxiously engaged, you know. And then they come out and you can see them sitting. And when I was a father, I would tell my children, there are certain places that you just don't sit in public and scratch fervently, you know. And they're all trying to, you know, and I am howling at the moon. The CIA folks don't see this stuff as funny. I do. So tonight, I want to talk about plausible deniability. And I would like to preface this by telling you, with a couple of prefacing comments. First and foremost, it's very important to me, especially here, among people that I care deeply about, that you know that I'm not being political. I'm not interested in politics. For me, what I'm going to discuss tonight is a moral issue. I don't mean to sound sanctimonious, but my mother taught me that there is a right and there is a wrong. My older brother convinced me that there was a gray area, you know, but so I'm not at all a political creature. And the second thing I'm going to say, I've tweaked my comments tonight to talk about the term plausible deniability. I'm going to preface this by saying I pulled a few lectures together because I need for that term to be understood. And then we'll turn to whistleblowing and my role in the whistleblowing and where we are today, okay? And as I said, any question that you have about the assassination, who did it, who didn't, what are the theories, I know many of the people that you see wagging their heads on the History Channel every November 22nd. I'm familiar with them. I know their work. They know what I do. So, first, one of the great things about this experience has been I had never been trolled before. And I love being trolled. Some nut writes this story about the incurious Dr. Pearcy. And I showed this to my class. I was like, this guy lit into me. He's making these things up. We just, oh my God, that document's already been in the public realm for 30 years, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. And he insulted me, not with that picture, but he included my buddy Mac. I mean, that's like a declaration of war, you know. He's getting my dog involved, my son's dog. But I start there because it was, for me, I actually reached out to Morley. I said, Jeff, he's like, don't worry about it. People talk about things that they don't know anything about, and the end. So tonight, I'll talk basically about these three things. And finally, whoops. How do current events fit into this? President Trump issued an executive order, a presidential executive order, that all records relating to the Kennedy assassination, and I might add here parenthetically other assassinations, and I won't go into that, but that they be, he didn't say that they be declassified, he said they are declassified, and he has the constitutional authority to do that. And I've identified some problems. A couple of weeks ago, I was on Capitol Hill in Representative Luna's office with Jefferson Morley. We were on the phone. We were in a meeting with the CIA brass, and I'll relate this a little bit more in detail later, but they don't like this. And Representative Luna displayed the most remarkable leadership I've ever been. I mean, she just is taking no prisoners with them. She literally picked up her phone, called the DCI, the Director of Central Intelligence, who didn't take her call, so he called President Trump. She called President Trump and said, we've got a problem. The agency's not cooperating. And that's kind of where we're at. But I'll come back to that. But before I do that, it's very important to me that folks understand the difference between misinformation, disinformation, and plausible deniability. They're very, very different things. Misinformation is people talking about things that they absolutely know nothing about. Last year, I had a student approach me. After one of my classes, she said, Dr. Pearcy, did you see Joe Rogan's podcast? I'm like, no, I'm busy listening to music at a ridiculous volume. I don't have time to listen to podcasts. She said, well, it'll change your perspective on everything. I mean, we're just wrong on so many things relating to this topic. Now I'm intrigued because I've been in the records, so I want to know, you know. Joe Rogan, she said, yeah. She said, he is the Walter Cronkite of our generation. All right, now that's just below the belt, but all right, I get it. That speaks to my old personness. I said, who was the guest, the expert? She couldn't remember. I said, so send me a link and let me see it. You know, I'll watch this revelation, and we'll go from there. Turns out it was Joe Rogan interviewing the actor Martin Sheen. And so my question, I will never, ever insult or menospreciar, as they say, to devalue or depreciate a student or embarrass them. I treat my students the way I want to be treated. All 31,000 of them I have. But this opened up a discussion in the class, and I asked them, which of the two people that you were listening to do you suppose has been within 10,000 yards of anything even remotely relating to what they were talking about? And that kind of stumped her. She didn't know. I mean, what would Walter Cronkite wouldn't do something, you know. The fact is, and this is what I teach my students, check your sources. That is an example of misinformation. Podcasts are misinformation that make a lot of money. And this is not difficult to corroborate or to prove. Disinformation is another issue entirely. Disinformation are partial truths weaponized by other governments to mislead and anger. I'm going to show you some examples of this, and they're difficult to see. But it's important that we as Americans know what disinformation is. Vladimir Putin established something known as the Internet Research Agency that's outside of St. Petersburg, Russia. And their sole job, if you'll pardon my Judeo-Christian term, is to figure out ways to piss off Americans. That's their job, 24/7, 365. And until 2007, they were kind of limited in their technological capabilities, but then they broke into the National Security Agency, which is our signals intelligence capital of the world, and stole some of our most important weapons. I'll show you what they do with that. But disinformation are partial truths that are weaponized intentionally by governments to deceive people. Now, my course on disinformation has evolved over time because more information has become available. And I'm going to walk way out on the edge of ice here. If anyone sees a black Suburban, let me know, okay? One really good example of a false flag operation is the 6th floor depository in Dallas, Texas. If you've ever been there, it is completely a false flag operation. And I know the people that run the false flag operation. I will not say it here because I still enjoy family life, but we'll probably get that in the congressional record at some point. Plausible deniability. Misinformation, people just yapping about things that they don't know anything about. And my students ask, well, how do you know? Stop and ask about sources. Look. Don't take any, and when I say don't take anyone's word, I tell them, don't believe me. Get into the archives, find out. Plausible deniability is a different thing, and that's what I'm talking about tonight. Because plausible deniability is a product of my parents' generation, and it made it possible for our government to do horrible things in our name and with our money and invoke national security or executive privilege to exculpate themselves. They avoid accountability. And that I have a problem with. I was asked by a friend before we started tonight about the oath that I took to protect our nation, and I would never ever violate an oath to protect our nation. I know where our nuclear weapon systems are located, the warheads, the propulsion, the guidance. I'm aware of these things. I would be killed before I would betray my country. I believe that people who do awful things in our names, things that, and you can run up with the Epstein files, whatever example somebody wants to pull up with, avoiding accountability just because you can is not national security. And the director of counterintelligence deciding in September of 1962 that John Kennedy needed to die, that's not in our national security. That's because he had just issued a National Security Action Memorandum 263, which ordered all troops withdrawn from Vietnam by December of 1965. That's when the decision was taken that he needed to die. But plausible deniability. First, I need to talk with you about misinformation, a term that the Soviets developed in the late 40s was useful idiots. And I don't ever use Wikipedia, and I don't let my students do it, but this is actually pretty good. It's a derogatory term for a person perceived as propagandizing for a cause without fully comprehending the cause's goals, and who is cynically used by the cause's leaders. The term was originally used during the Cold War to describe non-communists regarded as susceptible to communist propaganda and manipulation. The term has often been attributed to Vladimir Lenin, but this attribution is unsubstantiated. By 1948, now what I'm about to say is going to sound exotic. By 1948, Moscow knew unequivocally, and we knew unequivocally, that they could not defeat us in a conventional war or in a nuclear war. They knew this. Washington knew this. On January 17th, 1961, when Dwight D. Eisenhower went on television and warned of the military-industrial complex, that's what he's talking about. But Khrushchev very famously said, "We will destroy the United States, and we won't fire a shot." We're just, literally today, the GRU, the Russian military intelligence, have a philosophy that dates from the post-World War II era. Their belief is that they can change the minds of 100 million Americans in 3 generations. They can make us think whatever they want. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. This is difficult to look at. This is the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg. And yes, Western intelligence services have penetrated it. We're aware of it. I'm going to show you some of the ads that are unequivocally from the Internet Research Agency. This is disinformation. This is how Russians intend to defeat the United States. Technology is so good today that they can locate you, us. They have more than 10,000 data points on all of us. And that's not that big of a deal. So does my bank, in Lafayette. But they use it to manipulate. So I want Sharia banned, stop AI, all of that Sharia out of America. That is a group of 20-something people in Moscow laughing. If you want burqa banned in America, stop all invaders. That is the same. This is my favorite. Satan, if I win, Clinton wins. Jesus, not if I can help it. And where do you suppose, are there parts of the country where the devil versus Jesus would play a little bigger or a little better than other areas, right? The ardent Trump isn't my president. If you remember during George Floyd, try this one on for size. Some people died during that period, you may recall. The Internet Research Agency would penetrate social media. In those days, they controlled 2 million Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok accounts. Now they control way more. Geolocation is not difficult. In Provo, Utah, where I once lived, they announced a pro-George Floyd rally on the southwest corner of a main intersection. Then they went to the pro-police, stop the George Floyd movement. Same group of people sitting in an office and geolocated the corner directly across the street. And they said these, the terms that we all use, right? Or that we tend to do a lot of name calling. They're going to protest and they're going to be violent. That was literally all orchestrated by some recent college graduates sitting in that building in St. Petersburg, Russia, laughing. Same thing here. Oddly enough, the LGBT United is a Russian, as is the Don't Shoot. This is my favorite, the Blackivist and the Black Matters social media accounts. Both of those are Russian. Now, the We the People, your voice in the White House. It's Putin. He literally controls all of these things. And when people ask, well, what do we do about this? My answer is always the same. Check your sources. Hold your fire. There's really relatively little need to hate each other. In fact, I would say none. The name calling, the anger. We have real problems that I'm going to talk about in a moment that need our attention. Okay, to the subject at hand. The term plausible deniability has its origins immediately after World War II. President Truman, right as the war ended, disbanded the Office of Special Services, the OSS, predecessor to the CIA. And he said, gentlemen don't read other gentlemen's mail. I mean, that was his language at the time. Within 18 months, he changed his mind. And he signed, while riding on his beautiful Independence airplane, which you can see along with Kennedy's aircraft, 26,000 over in Dayton. It's very cool to go and see the table where these documents were signed. But he signed the National Security Act of 1947, reversing the gentleman not reading gentleman's moniker. He created the CIA. And he made the Joint Chiefs of Staff a permanent rather than merely a wartime component of our government. And I will just add as a sidebar here, I am completely in favor of both of those things. Intelligence is very, very important, more so than I can even discuss publicly, but I'm an absolute fervent believer. The agency was established to avoid a recurrence of Pearl Harbor. Our biggest failure to date was 9/11, and everyone at Langley and all of the sites where things happen knows this. So Truman signed the National Security Act in 1947, and then we get to this. This is critical. Some of you may remember Vice President Cheney in the weeks after 9/11. He said, well, we're going to have to work in the shadows. And that's what this law allows. National Security Council Directive 10-2, signed on my wife's, well, a few years before she was born, but June 18th, 1948, literally established plausible deniability as the policy of the U.S. government. Now, what does that mean? That means that we have an intelligence community. There are 16 members of the intelligence community, from State Department IRA, it's called IRA, to military intelligence, to geospatial intelligence, to the National Security Agency, where I just had a former student retire as the Director of Latin American Analysis. Very interesting to speak with. But this means that as long as they're acting in the name of national security, and they get to decide that they can do it. They have a black budget. No one knows. There are 5 people in Washington that know what the CIA's budget actually is for. And that's, to a certain extent, appropriate. But plausible deniability is going to create some problems. And I propose to you, this is where I fit in, I propose to you that a government out of control, there's no accountability here. I'll explain what I mean. Okay, now, this is going to be hard to hear. This is a whistleblower. He was a senior CIA officer. There have been a lot of whistleblowers that have come and said the types of things that he's going to say. I will tell you that the things that he says are true. And I hope that the numbers make you uncomfortable. I mean, when we were in high school, if you said something against Vietnam, you were considered a communist, you know. By the way, interesting sidebar. Anyone here remember Reader's Digest, subscribing to it? Oh, I'm going to get myself in trouble here. One of the things that I happened upon in a black site was the agency Ghost wrote a lot of things that appeared in the National Geographic and other weekly magazines, but specifically to tamp down any questioning of military budgets and these types of things. So if you'll listen to what this person says, we'll move on from there, please.
We've set out to overthrow functioning constitutional democracies in over 20 countries. We manipulated elections in dozens of countries. We created standing armies and directed them to fight. We went after to organize ethnic minorities to encourage them to revolt. The first thing we did in Nicaragua was to go to the Mosquito Indians, who had never gotten along with the other people in Nicaragua very well, and give them more money than they had seen in the entirety of history, and arms and training and rationales and sanctuaries in Honduras, and sent them into Nicaragua to attack, kill, fight, rape, burn, pillage. And this has been a technique the CIA has used in Nicaragua, in Thailand, in Vietnam, in Laos, in the Congo, in Iran, Iraq with the Kurds, in different parts of the world. We created, trained, and funded death squads like the Treasury Police in El Salvador. And we've assassinated world leaders, including the United States President in 1963, and I'll get to that in more detail in just a moment. You can never be sure how many people are killed in the jungles of Laos or the hills of Nicaragua, But adding them up as best we can, we come up with a figure of 6 million people killed, minimum figure. It has to be more than that. These things are all done in countries of the third world where the governments don't have the power to force the United States to stop destabilizing the country and brutalizing their people.
Now, think about the numbers that he just threw out. I'm not even going to go into that here, but I can tell you, I began my career in 1981 on the Costa Rica-Nicaragua border in a refugee camp for death squad refugees fleeing from death squads in El Salvador and fleeing from Contras in Nicaragua. And I have a very close friend over in Pennsylvania who was a U.S. soldier in Honduras, in Tegucigalpa, and he takes great offense at this. I'm not talking about the behavior of our military, okay? Soldiers, boots on the ground, have no clue of the wheres and the whys that these things are happening. A very, very small group of people know. And it's sensitive. But I would propose to you, most of us have heard of the Holocaust. I can tell you just the part of the world where I have worked, our tax dollars, and yes, I know chopper pilots who would leave Panama and ferry death squads up into indigenous communities and literally massacre everyone in the village. We killed hundreds of thousands of people, but we don't know about it because plausible deniability. Everything he just said is plausibly deniable. And all Langley has to do is say, that's not true, for crying out loud. You know, we're the United States. I got in an argument with the U.S. ambassador. I had classes from Panama and the United States recently on Zoom. And U.S. ambassadors are political appointees, so they tend to not be well informed, shall we say. And he spent most of his time in the golf club, and in Latin America, that is an issue in and of itself. That means you've got money. But I was in Panama when we attacked, and I know that we did not attack to get Noriega because I know the police down there, and I know what had happened 2 months earlier. We killed 5,000 people, and we buried them in mass graves. And yes, I know that unequivocally for a fact because I was there. And this irritated this ambassador. He was very upset with me. He's like, you've got to show me the science. I'm like, dude, I am not your research assistant. You know, you got to get out of the country club and go out into the, talk with Panamanians. So everything that he just said is plausibly deniable. You're familiar, some of you may be familiar with the recent case of Tulsi Gabbard, who was the director of the ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, and suddenly she resigned. Are you familiar with this? It was reported that a family member had a health problem. What actually happened is this. Tulsi Gabbard, as the boss of the entire intelligence community, ODNI is out in Falls Church, is up in a beautiful campus. Her job is to oversee this stuff. And there were 40 boxes that her, as the chief of the intelligence community of our government, was going through. And suddenly, she has to resign. Somebody's sick. And oh my goodness, come to find out, right about the same time, those 40 boxes disappeared. Gee, who took those? We don't know. This is such a mystery. A whistleblower 2 months ago, before Congress said, Director Gabbard was looking at 40 boxes of documents dealing with two issues: the Kennedy assassination and something known as MK Ultra. If you haven't heard of MK Ultra, it's this. In 1954, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, working for, he was the director of science at Langley, CIA. He issued an order that the Central Intelligence Agency purchase all of the known world's supply of LSD everywhere and bring it to the United States. And we did it. And that was part of, MK Ultra is a euphemism for a mind control program. But that's what it was. And curiously, those 40 boxes went missing, and my phone was ringing within about 20 minutes. Because I had talked earlier about a very specific document, and people were, Representative Luna, she wasn't pessimistic, but needed more information. And suddenly this whistleblower comes along and says, these 40 boxes are gone. My phone rang. I'm like, dude, she was like, you got to get out of here, you know. And so eventually I went. But every claim, including the 40 boxes, is plausibly deniable. This is not like someone mentioned recently. So plausible deniability is like the former FBI director, whatever his name is, who was charged with, no, that has nothing to do with plausible deniability. Plausible deniability is a legal way to do these things. And I'm telling you as a son of Frankfort, as somebody who grew up here and saw and learned right from wrong, I have a problem with this. I simply have a problem with it. We, right now, are at an inflection point that's difficult to realize unless you're buried in all of the stuff that I'm buried in. But President Trump issued this executive order. In the 3 previous investigations into the assassination, and by the way, Jefferson Morley even, let alone Representative Luna, did not know what I'm about to tell you. When the Warren Commission investigated the assassination, by the way, the decision was made, what the conclusion was, within 24 hours. There's something called the Katzenbach memo, who was the Deputy Attorney General under Bobby Kennedy. The day that John Kennedy was buried, Katzenbach wrote a memo and said, we've got to convince the American people that this is what happened. But J. Edgar Hoover let it be known the night of the assassination that, as Mark Lane said, case closed. We've got our man. We'll get to that in a few minutes. Some of you have seen this before. I'm going to show you a couple of things now that are difficult to see, all right? I tell my younger students, this may trigger you. This is a Zapruder film. In 1975, I'm laying on the floor at my Aunt Minnie's house down at 1152 South 2nd Street. And this came on. And she used to read books to me about Kennedy's assassination, not from a political standpoint, but it just broke her heart. You know, she would cry. And this exact program came on.
I'm telling you right straight out that if you are at all sensitive, if you're at all queasy, then don't watch this film. Just put on the late night movie because this is very heavy. It's the film shot by the Dallas dress manufacturer Abraham Zapruder, and it's the execution of President Kennedy. And Bob and Dick, would you please narrate what we're seeing as we show this film?
The American public had ever seen this.
This is the Zapruder film.
Okay, so the cars are coming along now into Dealey Plaza?
Yes, these are the lead motorcycles of the motorcade.
All right, now with the President and Mrs. Kennedy is also Governor Connolly.
Right. Now, before he goes behind the sign, the President is waving to the crowd. When he comes out from behind the sign, he is shot, then Governor Connolly is shot.
He's already been hit.
He's already been hit.
He would have survived that shot, but he had a back brace on, so he couldn't get down.
The headshot.
This shot,
that's
he
the
would
shot
not
that blew off his head. It's the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in the movie.
Now, the Warren Commission said that all of the shots were fired from behind by Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone assassin. firing at the president, and as you could see clearly, the head is thrown violently backwards, completely consistent with the shot from the front, right. Now this is an extreme blow-up of just the president from the film. All right. Coming out behind the sign, he's shot. He's hit from the hit here.
From the front, too.
From the front. Now, Jackie doesn't realize what's happened yet. She goes to his aid. And now? He's hit again, the violent backward motion. Totally consistent with 80% of the witnesses, which said the shot came from the grassy knoll in front and to the right.
It's interesting to note how many people is running towards where most folks thought the shots came from.
That's the most upsetting
That's
thing
Dick
I've
Gregory
ever seen. We'll talk
speaking.
about it in a
We
minute.
brought him to campus at SRU. That was interesting.
I'm telling you right straight out.
I know.
That if you
I know Bob Groden. This is why our government established the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1975-76 because of this show. It raised so many questions, just like Oliver Stone's show did in the early 90s, and they established the ARRB. What no one knew until very, very recently was each time this was investigated, the CIA told Congress the one individual that would be permitted to come in and told them ahead of time, you must tell us what you want to see. And G. Robert Blakey did the nation no good at all. He was the attorney that was the lead investigator. And if I have time, I'll describe what happened. But he came out and he said, oh, I went out to CIA and they showed me everything. Anybody with any working knowledge of the intelligence community knows that is utterly ridiculous. And after I reached out to Jefferson Morley in 2018, he called Blakey up at Notre Dame where he was teaching law school. He's like, any comment? He's like, well, no. This is another version of the same film. Groden became the forensic photographer for the House Select Committee on Assassinations. A couple of important things happened in the 70s. Now, the story is the same. The House Select Committee was supposed to rubber stamp the Warren Commission report, and they were going to do this. Two things, assassinations. A couple of important things happened in the 70s. Now, the story is the same. The House Select Committee was supposed to rubber stamp the Warren Commission report, and they were going to do this. Two things happened. First, Robert Groden. So Groden goes in there after he's on Geraldo Rivera. And the first thing he does, in those days you didn't have Photoshop or AI. And it was very expensive to amend or alter photography. And there were very few organizations that did it well. None better than the U.S. intelligence community. They used a technique called matting. M-A-T-T-I-N-G. And Groden pointed out that if you look at a matted photograph under a 3D viewer, you can see the actual photograph. And he told me about this. He literally did what any good, curious historian would do. Once he realized what was going on, he looked in the actual photographs. And if you've ever seen an actual photograph, the photograph that was released is that there's a very nice, neat entry hole here and a skull flap. The actual photographs aren't so pleasant. I know the radiologist who conducted radiology on the president's remains that night, Gerald Custer. Now, why he did this, I don't know. He alarmed me when he said it, but he was like, he said, that hole, there was no brain. Of course there wasn't. It had already been removed. But he said, I stuck my fist inside the president's hand. I'm like, dude, you are not well. You know, why would you honk and do that? But the point is, Groden discovers, looking at the actual photographs, the truth, that the entire back of the head is gone. And oh, by the way, the wound that was supposed to have gone through the president and out his neck and blew off the right nipple of Governor Connolly, so now we have a one-nipple governor. That bullet wound in the lower spine had no trajectory. It went in about an inch, and it fell out on the floor. And Dr. Humes picked it up in the autopsy room and handed it to Agents Seibert and O'Neill, but that story didn't break until 1980, and my paranoid friend David Lifton broke that story. But the other thing that happened, along with the autopsy pictures, is they were literally preparing to wind it up, and a little old lady, a little person, a sweet old person, younger than me, calls up the House Select Committee and says, hey, why don't you come out to Dallas? In the Daltex building, there are records and there are dicta belts. She said there was a police officer in the motorcade that day who had his microphone stuck on. You might want to hear that recording. Yeah, that might be a good idea. So Blakey goes out there, they listen to it, and the official conclusion of the House Select Committee on Assassinations was that there was a 90% probability of a conspiracy. And literally, the Warren Committee, we have two standing decisions. One is that Oswald did it alone. One is that conspiracy, meaning more than one person. But the cool thing about the dicta belt is the acoustics in Dealey Plaza are pretty straightforward. So they did acoustic fingerprints. So Enterprising Groden more recently superimposed the actual shots that were picked up on the microphone onto the video. And that's what I'd like to show you now. Witnesses that day, everyone present, said that the last two shots came very close together. This does not have anything about it. Now, I do want to point out, though, there's something interesting here, if I can figure out in my geriatric computer skills how to do this. There's a young lady running alongside the left side of the limousine. And she's got a red skirt on. She's very important, actually, because she's running along, and just about where Kennedy is there now, the first shot is fired. And she instinctively stops. You know, she's running along with the president, Mr. President, Mr. President. And you see her stop. Let me back up a little bit here, and you can... I should know her name, but you'll see her right there. There she stopped. I once had dinner with the police officer who was riding left outboard of the president's car that day. And he said, he told me he was hit so hard with brain matter and bone that he thought he'd been shot. There was something called the Harper fragment, a piece of the skull that was found 75 feet to the left rear of the limousine by a law student. In the aftermath of all of this, of course, there were a lot of people. There's an active duty soldier on the grassy knoll filming. And he hears a bullet come over his head. He's seen live action. And a guy trembling approaches him and says, "Were you filming that? I need your camera." And he's like, "Dude, on my life, this is my mother's camera." Smart guy. But the guy grabbed his camera and ripped the film out of it. And this happened over and over, all over Dealey Plaza. There were no Secret Service agents on the ground in Dallas that day. Not one. Zero. No FBI agents, nothing. That's all part of the way he was assassinated, and if you're interested, I can explain that later, but that's all nonsense. All right, Very quickly, let me put myself into this story, as weird as that sounds. Way back in the 1860s, actually 1865, Abraham Lincoln ordered the State Department to keep and I'm quoting, a thorough and accurate record of our nation's dealings with other countries. And that went along swimmingly until the post-World War II era. Plausible deniability, the formation of the CIA. All of a sudden, the State Department and the military and other groups learned that the agency wasn't playing nicely with this mandate to keep an accurate record. And so they created a position known as joint historian. There's one joint historian in the entire government. He, she, or they work officially for the State Department and the Central Intelligence Agency. Those are the two employers. But the responsibility is that the joint historian have clearances to go anywhere in the world, from the most sensitive site in the world for our country, something that has to do with continuity of government, where there's literally only one signature in Washington that can get you on that compound. And I had to have that. I had to have access to everything. So the joint historian was created, the position by Congress, to mediate, not to declassify, but as a professional historian to go in and arrive at a conclusion. This document's needed, this story's needed to keep an accurate history of our country's relations with other nations. I am, and I suspect I will always be, the only non-full-time government employee appointed joint historian. I was talking about this a bit earlier, but I, early in my career, did a lot of work briefing ambassadors, trying to warn them not to do stupid things. But seriously, the implications of the Panama Canal Treaties, for example. State Department would fly me to Managua to teach Communist Party officials in Spanish about our country, the idea being soft diplomacy. Eventually, the State Department and I worked closely with them, and one of my former students, this is the proudest thing that I have as a teacher, as an educator, went to work, got his PhD, I directed him. He went to work at the State Department and became a division chief. Now, later, he's going to become the senior analyst for the National Security Agency. I had lost track of him then until a couple of months ago when he texted me. And he's like, so you're the, and I can't use the expletives that he used, but the CIA whistleblower. I said, yes, how did you find out that? He said, Russian television. I said, well, okay, that's, But I went to, CIA invited me because my former student had pushed for us to declassify our role in the Civil War in Guatemala, where things too horrific to describe happened. He pushed it and he pushed it. And finally he got the agency to agree. They convened this meeting at Foggy Bottom, State Department headquarters. C-SPAN's rolling. I've got the mic. I'm sitting between the senior Latin American analyst for the entire government, who scares me. His name is Brian Littell, and the Guatemalan ambassador. And some scholars were speaking. I took my whole class. I arranged ahead of time for them to have clearance and to go into this with me. But one of the scholars, and I won't name names, I'm not going to be unprofessional, but she's very well known for pushing the government to get documents declassified, which is a great thing, right? But I had, as the chair of this panel, I had to read everyone's work ahead of time. And she used language like those, we're imperialist pigs and we're going in and we're ruining these lives. All of that's very entertaining, but she had 52 sources that she used. All of them were American and in English. So when she finished, I told her, I said, you're committing exactly the same crime that you're accusing our country of committing. You're committing intellectual imperialism. And then I said, Kate, next time you're in Guatemala City, why don't you do this? Why don't you tell your taxi driver not to stop at the Marriott or the Hyatt? Why don't you go up into the highlands of Quetzaltenango and live for a year or two, learn Quiché, talk to the people of Guatemala and see how they feel about the things you're saying. To say that she did not receive my critique well is putting it mildly, but she couldn't leave with her team, her cadre from George Washington University until the panel closed. But the Guatemalan ambassador stood up and shook my hand, and he said, thank you for insisting that the people of Guatemala be included in the history of Guatemala. I'm like, okay. That's why I got appointed joint historian, the only outsider ever. But the CIA historian and the State Department historian were both present. One of them, the State Department historian, was laughing hysterically. The CIA director, the CIA historian, was not laughing, but it was done. So I go to Washington, and I start working, and in the legal discharge of my duties, there was a historian at the State Department who was researching a topic. He had nowhere near the clearance to get within 1,000 yards of where I was. So I would go into these black sites, and I would look. And my perspective as a professional historian from the outside, where I've spent decades in archival research, is different than a CIA or State Department historian who they kind of curate. You know, they decide what gets to go and what doesn't get to go, and et cetera. So they're not good at deep dives. Anyway, I happened upon, I ordered a folder that was so sensitive that everybody in the compartmented information facility had to vacate. Even the CIA historian. Nobody had clearance except me to be there when this box arrived. Those things have to be couriered by people who have the clearance equal to the contents of the box, and a courier is always accompanied by an M4 toting person that helps make sure that they get there. And if the packaging has been messed with, a federal law has occurred. It's serious. So this thing shows up. I'm going through this, and here's this folder. In the middle, my search terms did not include JFK or the assassination or Lee Harvey Oswald, none of those things. And that's what makes the story kind of funny. But I pulled this folder out. I had legal authority and right to do so. And it was literally a 50-page Inspector General's report after the House Select Committee G. Robert Blakey had visited Langley. They had completely forged. Now, when I say forged, when you say sanitize and redact, you draw lines through it. That's not what I'm talking about. They have their own bindery, and they do a beautiful job of it. And the Mexico City records, the people that call me incurious are sure that I don't know what I'm talking about because there was a sanitized version of this release, and so I don't, and none of them have ever been in the box where I was. I know what I worked with. I remember the search terms, the Boolean logic combination I used perfectly. I have a photographic memory when it comes to this stuff. But literally, they did an internal review, a secret internal review, to see if they had fooled Congress and the American people. And it was very disrespectful of G. Robert Blakey. I won't go into detail here, but this is why I finally reached out to Morley in 2018. The senior CIA brass that accompanied, the one person that accompanied Morley and took him these falsified records, they are praying literally to God. I mean, they were nervous Because if he asks any questions, well, what about this? They're in trouble. But the agency knows that unless you've been in the agency, you have no way of having any clue what they do or don't have. So Blakey sits down and goes through these things, stands up, says, I have no questions. And the after-action report said, G. Robert Blakey is the most uncurious human being I have ever interacted with. And that is CIA after-action report speak for what a dipshit. I mean, I pardon the language, but they're making fun of him. You know, they got away with it. Now, how does that all fit together to the big story? First, let me play some show and tell. This building right here is a building that the CIA does not like having pictures of. And by the way, I did not put this picture up. Jefferson Morley did that. Now, I did, when I was in Washington recently, I decided I'd go on a photographic journey, you know, reminiscing. So I went by this black site. It is the most secure black site in the Western Hemisphere. They do not want you to know where it's at. It's right by Dulles Airport. But here I am with my iPhone, you know, and I've got my camera, I've got my car stereo going, and I'm at the back gate. And by the way, these people, this is the most heavily guarded site possibly in the United States, more so than the White House. They have every automatic weapon you can think of. They have anti-tank weaponry. There are things going on this compound that I will not discuss publicly because that would be betraying something that I said I wouldn't do. But suffice it to say, this is the ultimate secret place. And while there, I want to introduce you to Mary. So I see this IG report, and I'm like, well, this rocks. We did it, and we covered it up. The important thing is that IG report, that Inspector General's report, details methodically and painstakingly exactly how the Central Intelligence Agency did this. Sometime later, I'm downstairs, and I'll show you something kind of funny in a moment. But I was in an area called the Declassification Center. And these sites are not places where there's water fountain chit-chat. No. You don't speak to the people who work in the skiff next to you. You have no idea what they do. They have no idea what you do. The skiff right next to where I worked in this building was labeled the Terrorist Media Center. So when we went into Abbottabad, and we got bin Laden, and we got his hard disks, and we got his floppies and his jump drives, they were in that skiff within 24 hours, where intelligence analysts work with them. But it's a weird and interesting kind of a place to work. So I go downstairs to this area where the CIA historian's never been. You do not enter unless you have a reason to. And I did. I was actually looking at the assassination of Archbishop Romero. So I'm down there, and oddly enough, there's a skiff within a skiff. So kind of a vault within a vault. And over here, this vault within a vault, the door's open, and then there's this woman named Mary speaking very loudly in a Northport, New York accent. And I'm cracking up, but it's hard to read about Archbishop Romero's assassination. And that's an environment where you cannot act surprised at anything. And my assistant, the person who was helping me with redaction, said, don't bother. Don't worry about her. That's just Mary. She takes care of making sure certain Kennedy artifacts will never see the light of day. Now, of course, Tom Pearcy wants to say, WTF, right? What but I had to act like I didn't hear it. But afterward, as I stand up to leave, she said, would you like to meet Mary? And I was like, sure, why not? And I go into this room where they have a list of every human being that's ever entered. There are 50 names on it. I did not sign it, because I introduced myself to her as the nation's joint historian. And we had a nice chat, but as we're chatting, I'm just looking around, and there was a movie of Lee Harvey Oswald meeting with the CIA station chief in Mexico City in September of 1963. That's very significant for reasons I won't address here, but if anyone has questions afterward, I absolutely will. But this is the place. To get Morley's attention, back in 2018, I sent him this, which is an actual, well, as best I could do on my iPad, right? I mean, I'm geriatric, I can't even see the screen. But this is the ground floor, the entrance. You go in there, security. You do not go in with anything smart or phone or electronic. There's nothing that says CIA, but they're good at what they do. And then you walk down a long hall. I can't go into stuff that's going along the way, but there's a stairwell there where I would go up to the second floor to my office right here at number 2. But right beside the staircase is this declassification center. And inside the declassification center is what I dubbed and trolls immediately pounced on, and the CIA denounced its existence, of course. But I told Morley, I said, that's the Kennedy skiff. That's where they keep things that literally nobody knows exists. Artifacts, as well as documents. Anyway, to conclude, several weeks ago, I got a call from Representative Luna's office. And they said, Representative Luna needs you here tomorrow. I'm like, okay. I mean, I live nearby in Pennsylvania, right? It's only a 6-hour drive, but we need you out here. So I'm like, cool, I'll be there. And he said, you and the representative and Jefferson Morley, who is working as the special advisor to the House Committee investigating declassification, you will ride in a Suburban from her office building, an office in a long building, to a CIA point where they will meet you. Okay, I have told them, I will not tell you the terms that I used to conduct the search. And I won't, ever. Representative Luna has pressed this and said, we need to get Dr. Pearcy access to a discrete server in the intelligence community where he can locate these materials. And I've coached them. We need to arrange to have them couriered because the CIA will, from the moment they know where this is, the documents become in play. Well, I got a call late that night. They said, never mind. The CIA is not going to let us do it. They're demanding that Representative Luna go in by herself. That's what happened in the Warren Commission report or investigation, the House Select Committee investigation, and the Assassination Records Review Board investigation. I briefed Representative Morley that night, and I told her, they're going to show you things and tell you that this is a document or that it doesn't exist. I sent a very detailed brief. The documents that I'm talking about contain 3 very specific data points that are immensely inculpating. They remove any doubt of the CIA's role in these events. And if the document they show you does not contain these, then Representative Luna, you know that they're lying. I'm so happy to say that she had the guts to stand up, and she honestly, this blew me away. I'm sitting in her office. She was like, Dr. Pearcy, it was a shit show. I'm like, okay, I mean, if a congressman says it was, then I assume it was. But she said they tried it. They tried the same thing they've always done. And the agency's been investigated for a lot of other things, and they use this same technique. What makes this moment in history different is I can tell them I'm not a whistleblower like, you know, the government's done all these awful things. I can walk them to the specific document. And to conclude, I sent this after action report to Representative Luna, and it is a surreal experience to be driving by my house, my old house on John Street, reliving the good old days, and have the Capitol call me on signal and say, because President Trump's involved with this. When Representative Luna got ticked at the CIA, she called President Trump directly, and now he's bringing pressure to bear. But as an outsider, but as a professional historian, I pointed out 3 problems that I honestly, with all of my heart, think that need to be fixed. And until they are fixed, we're going to have a mess, whatever files it is, etc. First, there's a serious conflict of interest. The CIA gets to determine what does and does not fall under declassification orders, which is ridiculous. So the document, for example, that I identified, the agency can't find it. So technically, we're kind of in a legal gray zone, you know, because the president used executive authority to say everything is declassified. But the agency gets to decide what everything is. And we need to fix that. Someone other than CIA personnel ought to be determining what does or does not fall into a subject that has been ordered declassified. Number 2, archival inexperience. I'm not bragging, I'm not saying I'm anything special, but those folks have very little deep dive experience in archival materials. I've been doing this for 40 years. I see things differently than they do. I remember, I literally, every document that I've ever brought out of an archive, for any reason, anywhere in the world, I assign an alphanumerical value to it. And I write an annotation to it. So that at a moment's notice, thousands of documents, I can pinpoint exactly what it is that I need. I just donated all that to the government of Panama, by the way. But they can't find this document. And they pled with me until Representative Luna lit into them and said, stop it. It isn't going to happen your way. It's going to happen our way. They pled with me, honest to goodness, to tell them how to find this document. And that ain't going to happen. And as I concluded here, ignorance ought not be the foundation of plausible deniability. I firmly and with all of my heart believe that. I'm not going to use the word stupid, but sometimes watching them is like watching the Keystone Cops. I mean, of the CIA, we get this Jason Bourne impression of they're everywhere and nowhere. Nah, they're just human beings. Funny sidebar to almost end with. Right when they had done all of the background checks for me, and I had been granted all of these clearances, and I'm leaving my position at Slippery Rock, and I'm going to Washington. By the way, thank God that I'm married to a smart person, because I'm like, let's sell the house, we're out of here. And Shauna was like, you know what, why don't we take unpaid leave, keep the house, let some students live in it, and it was a wise thing to do. I would be living in a box right now if I weren't married to Shauna. But as I was preparing to leave for Washington, I hear my wife, Shauna, howling at the moon, laughing at a computer terminal. She's like, Thomas, you might want to come check this out. And she'd gone, something raped my professor, I don't know. But I had told students about smuggling photocopies, not originals, but documents out of a dictatorship in Central America that would have gotten me killed. And so I had stopped showering for a week, put all my wet underwear in this leather bag, because I was banking on these macho stud muffin M16 wielding black boot thugs not wanting to dig through my wet underwear. And it rocked. It was absolutely fantastic. And it worked. But one of my students was like, Dr. Pearcy's stories about smuggling documents rock. She's like, you think this is a problem now, Mr. Joyner's story? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Finally, the real problem that I have with this is the complete, literal, complete lack of control, lack of any accountability that the Central Intelligence and the intelligence community, but especially the CIA, they get to designate what is or is not included in a presidential order only because no president, nobody that has not been there has any clue what actually exists. So they get to decide. And we have an intelligence community that the CIA is the most powerful entity in the federal government. When Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles, John Foster was Secretary of State, Alan Dulles was Director of CIA, there's no question of who was going to move and shake when things had to happen. So I conclude by proposing that the answer to this quagmire is government by the people, for the people, and of the people. This is not preventing Pearl Harbor. This is not preventing 9/11. This is doing horrific things, hiding them from us, and I'm avoiding the topic, but you all know what I'm talking about when I say that there's a lot going on right now where that complete lack of accountability is literally keeping people unaware, shall we say. Thank you. I'll stop there. I've rambled on long enough. Does anyone have any questions? Please.
If we the people have any power in the voting booth?
I agree.
And more specifically, the integrity of our vote in the voting booth.
Yes.
Is there anything that you're aware of that has compromised the legitimacy of our vote in the voting booth, and how it then results in the tally?
No. Not only I'm not saying I'm not aware of, I'm saying I'm aware of the fact I know how the tallying occurs and how the network works. It's like a discrete server for the intelligence community. I agree with you that we, the people, we have to act. We have to vote. We need to inform ourselves. But I would go a step further and say, and this is what I tell my students, and call me, I'm a Frankfort hot dog. I'm a son of Frankfort. I was raised by kind people. I honestly feel this way. Going back to misinformation and disinformation, the mean-spirited name-calling and accusations that are leveled in both directions, not just one to the other, but on all sides. If we spend our time following up on what has or has not been promised and what is happening and being kind to each other, we the people will get it back. I can tell you that my students, 17, 18, 20, 23, 24 years old, are all very disillusioned at old people fighting. Now, I do understand your question regarding tallying the vote. Well, what you see is, for example, I have a fabulous clip that I wish I could show you right now on this subject. People are under the mistaken illusion that electoral votes are uploaded to the cloud and that it's conventional so it can be hacked, when we're looking for servers wherever. We, the people, need to do a better job of informing ourselves of how this really works before we level complaints and accusations. And I'm not talking about you or me or us. I'm simply saying we spend so much of our time worrying about what other people are doing, and we need to pay attention to what we're doing and the people that we voted for, no matter who we voted for. It isn't a political thing. Are they doing what they said they will do? I'll give you an example. President Trump issued this executive order on the Kennedy records, right? That he did in part because of Bobby Kennedy Jr. But if President Trump enforces the executive order that he has issued, we are at a turning point in history. I was disappointed when, while still in D.C., the White House did not go directly to the CIA and say, knock off the nonsense. The White House went to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which is where some nonsense had been happening. So, I mean no offense or insult in my response. I respect you and I understand the concern. I would propose to you that it's not difficult to learn exactly how the electoral system works. The votes are counted. The votes that's not difficult. It's there. And I could give you some very good recommendations if you reach out to me of top U.S. Security firms in the United States who've investigated this, who've looked into it. It's people that argue the most about votes being uploaded and stolen, et cetera, are generally people that are our age that don't know a lot about technology. You have a follow-up question or a complaint, or you want to throw something at me? Okay, I hope I'm not giving offense. Okay, please.
You've shared
Thank you.
pretty explosive information with us, and I'm sure you've shared it with other audiences too. What is it that's suppressing our pretty robust media from really digging into this and exposing it to the rest of us?
Well, the media has been co-opted by the right or left, but it's been co-opted. And the media uses, a very good example of this, back when AIDS was first an issue, right? The U.S. military biological weapons in Fort Detrick, Maryland, that's true. You know, we do make biological and chemical weapons there. The Russians released a report in 1983 in an English language paper in India, a small paper, but they knew it would be picked up by the American press. And they said, at Fort Detrick, Maryland, the United States military is created AIDS to get rid of Jews, gays, and blacks. Now, if you're old enough to remember that, you remember that was a divisive topic. I mean, 6 months later, Dan Rather is reporting this on the evening news, you know. No, what we need is yes, they are. On the right and on the left. I don't follow U.S. press. I use the BBC. Sometimes I'll go to the Christian Science Monitor, which is a good neutral source, but I can usually tell when somebody's blowing in one direction or the other. You know, it's just, they're talking out their rear end about things that their audience wants to hear, whether it's CNN, MSNBC, or Fox. And that is just another tool that the Internet Research Agency is using to feed us nonsense, to get us to not pay attention to the fact that we have a president who issued an order that could bring us to a significant juncture in our history. And, you know, as long as I tell my students, we tend as a country to have the historical memory of a carrot. You know, we don't, of all the places I've ever taught history in the United States, no matter west, east, south, or north, we tend to know least about our history, which surprised me, but I've learned it over many decades. And I don't say it in anger or prejudice. I'm a gringo. You know, I'm a very proud American. I love my country. But history forms the basis of our national conscience. And if we don't know history, you know, then we don't have a conscience. And the Russians and the press and the Chinese, you know, all of these play. I won't prolong this, but a very good example, when we were growing up in the 70s during the Vietnam War, many of you are old enough to remember that. There were anti-war protests. There was great rock and roll. I mean, let's face it, you know. Yeah, I bring rock and roll into my classroom. I play Golden Country and project the lyrics on the screen. Now, do they understand it? Well, no, but at least I let them know that we've been here before. Or I show them war pigs, which you can't miss that, right? But several years ago, you know, President Kennedy issued, my point here is, historical knowledge matters. And the Vietnam War is a good example. Several years ago, the National Security Agency did a lot of declassification, and we don't. I am developing a tool, by the way, online that I'm sharing on Facebook and I'm sharing with other countries about how to actually do archival research. And I will put that on my Facebook page so that anyone who wishes to, I provide the URLs. All you got to do is click and you go. And I give written instructions on how to get it down to where we're working in the archives of other countries, because any modern browser can translate something into English in 10 seconds. But, you know, John Kennedy issued National Security Action Memorandum 263 in September of 1963. That is unequivocal. It happened. He ordered the withdrawal of all U.S. troops from Vietnam no later than December of 1965. That was the moment at which the decision was made. But think about these numbers. The day Kennedy died in Dallas, there were 76 KIA Americans, which is 76 too many. There were 15,500 troops in country, and they're going to be withdrawn, right? This is it. There's no real popular support for building it up. So the government does what the government does. In August of '64, they announced that what's called in history books, erroneously, the Tonkin Gulf incident, you know. And the Pentagon came out and said, oh my goodness, the USS Maddox and the USS Joy were cruising along in international waters when suddenly communist gunboats attacked them. And if that happens again, we're going to have, you know, what American doesn't want to defend our troops, right? McNamara comes out the next day or 2 days later and says it happened again. And as I speak, we're attacking the port of Haiphong. We went from 16,000 troops in Vietnam and 75 dead to 542,000 troops in Vietnam with 59,000 dead. And the two culprits there that Americans ought to know about are, one, Lyndon Johnson comes in and says, the day that Kennedy's buried, he issued National Security Action Memorandum 274, which reversed everything. Yeah. Lady Bird was and by the way, we need more first ladies and first gentlemen named after animals, right? Wouldn't you agree? I mean, Lady Bird, I don't think we've had one since. Lady Bird was the principal shareholder in Bell Helicopter. You know, I have a problem with that. But the Tonkin Gulf incident didn't happen. And had it happened, they would have been absolutely within international law to have done what they were accused of doing, because the Maddox and the Joy were baiting. They were swerving into and out of North Korean waters. If a Chinese submarine surfaces in New York Harbor, we have every right to destroy that submarine, just as they would. But the National Security Agency released audio tapes, actual transmissions, about 10 years ago. There's a book called The President's Club that talks about this, where literally it didn't happen. You know, it literally did not happen. But that's a false flag that the government threw up. I'll stop with this. A person by the name of Anna Chenault. Has anyone in this room ever heard the name Anna Chenault? No? Lyndon Johnson, his goal before leaving office in 1968 was to have the Vietnam War over. You may remember they had the Paris peace talks. I was talking with the diplomat recently, and he was like, we just pulled out. No. Actually, what happened is this. Nixon publicly was saying, I support the president's call for an end of the war. Secretly, he reached out to Anna Chenault, who was the president of Women for Nixon with Vietnamese language skills. And with no authority whatsoever, Nixon said, would you please go to Paris, pull aside our allies, and tell them, don't do it, you'll get a better deal under Nixon. Now, how do we know this for sure? We're not just guessing, because the National Security Agency was taping the conversation. And you can sit and listen to it, and you hear it. In other words, Johnson did what he did. Nixon wanted to be president of the United States because he knew that if the war ended, he thought a Democrat would win. So this was to become president. He wanted to be president so badly that he was willing to sacrifice the lives of 30,000 Americans. And you know what? I've got a problem with that. I've got a real problem with that. But that's all part of this plausible deniability. You know, they shouldn't have been able to get away with the Tonkin Gulf incident. They shouldn't have been able to get away with the Anna Chenault stuff. But all of that happens because there's no oversight. It's a 45-minute answer to your question. I apologize. Any other questions?
Do you ever have concerns about your safety because you're looking at CIA affairs and you're seeking the truth? And you know how to find it?
Yes.
You know what's in that cup?
It's water, yeah. By the way, if interested, I'll tell you later an interesting story about Sirhan and a drink that he got right before he went to the ambassador. I'm not, but my family is concerned. My wife made me give her the names of the attorneys in Pittsburgh and Washington that would help her find me if I disappeared. And by the way, the biggest law firm in Pittsburgh and a very famous attorney in Washington will help me pro bono if I, disappear or get in trouble. If I am charged with a felony, I lose my job, I lose my benefits, my health insurance, we lose everything. It would destroy our family. So it took a long time for me to decide to do this, and I will say I made the decision prayerfully. I simply think it's the right thing to do, and there's going to be risk in doing right things. I'm not scared, though. I think that gives them too much credit. Yeah. I saw another question. Please.
I'm just curious, during your time in South America, there's a lot of counterinsurgency.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever deal with PSYOPs or the School of Americans in Panama?
As a matter of fact, I have a School of the Americas PSYOPs training manual for interrogation. The Pentagon is under the misunderstanding that there were only 5 copies of that left. There are 6. A Panamanian colleague of mine taught at the School of the Americas. And yeah, I'm quite familiar with it. And it sounds like you are also. Yeah. Okay, you were there. Did you know General Lima? He wasn't general then, but he was a G2. He was head of G2.
I remember they had CIA up on the second floor.
Yeah.
1970, they vamoosed, got the hell out.
Yeah. They did some, anyway. Other questions? Anyone? Nobody asked me who killed Kennedy. Why did I do what? Oh, James Angleton was the director of counterintelligence at the Central Intelligence Agency. This is documented. Jefferson Morley has established this. The day we know that Oswald was CIA. That's not a question. A man by the name of Joanides was in charge of counterintelligence in Miami, and he ran Oswald. Joanides answered to James Angleton, who was chief of counterterrorism. And Oswald was sheep-dipped. He was very much made to look like a communist. In those days, to have a television camera show up when somebody's picketing was not as common as it is today. But cameras showed up, and they showed him. I will say regarding Oswald, the CIA, right after the assassination, said, well, we have one photograph of Oswald, and here it is. And they showed some dude that was heavier than I am and about 4 foot. And everybody's like, this is not Oswald. In the Inspector General's report that I referenced, they reported that they have 2,300 high-quality photographs of Lee Harvey Oswald in Mexico at the Soviet and Cuban embassies. The reason for those was if Oswald, by the way, was exactly what he said he was, a patsy. He did not know his role in this. But if in the misfortune that Oswald had lived, the agency needed evidence that he was a communist to pitch this to the American people. And so we have a lot of high-quality Hasselblad cameras focused on him and his movements in Latin America and in the Soviet Union. But yeah, the agency did that. You really want to know? Well, I'm going to go out on a limb here, and if you see Suburban circling Bones, you rescue my ass, okay? Here's how it happened. You've heard of Carlos Marcello, right? The godfather in New Orleans, who also was responsible for Texas. The best evidence suggests right now that Angleton made the decision. Joanides would have been involved with it. Oswald would not have been involved with it. Hoover would not have known about it. Hoover had instructions to act in case of this or that. But the CIA had worked with Marcello for years, with the mafia. We arranged for Marcello to go to Marseille and hire a wet team. We paid them, and those of you who are old enough to have been around then, or your parents, you'll love this, with our tax dollars, we paid them in heroin, because heroin is an easy way to launder money, right? Now, we did the same thing, by the way. What's that? Right. We did the same thing, by the way, in Panama and South America in the 90s when all of that cocaine was flooding into the Americas, into East Los Angeles specifically. But the French Connection, we paid this team, and the Marseille wet team's technique is to get uniforms and badges, police and military, Secret Service, anything that they need, and they would come onto the scene and do their thing. There were 3 shooters. I think there were 5 shots. I only hear 4 on the addictive belt, but I think there's a 5th. I know old guy standing across the road. Why is his name escaping me? He was watching the presidential motorcade from the other side of the plaza. And he's standing by a police officer. His name will come to me. And James Tay. And I met James Tay. He still had the scar. He's standing there watching from a distance. He's 200 feet from the limousine, standing by a cop, a police officer, and when the first shot rings out, the police officer looks at him and says, "You've been hit." He's like, okay. And he told me, I wiped my face, sure enough. There was a bullet strike from a miss in the curb all the way across the plaza. And curiously, and by the way, Tague being shot really screwed up our inspector's magic bullet thing, I mean, it made him kind of twist and turn and make it work when it didn't work. Of course, Occam's razor. But the House Select Committee wanted to see that piece of concrete because you, of course, could look at remains of a projectile, resin, And the FBI said, you know what, our archives were so full, we just had to get rid of it. I mean, they'd gone out with a concrete saw, cut it out, and done the American thing, I guess, right? Other questions? By the way, I failed to say this at the beginning, and I wish to now. I want to thank Deborah Pearson and my friends here in Frankfort, but we've gotten to know each other on Facebook, and I'm about transparency and accountability. That's what I want. I'm an American. I think that government ought to be responsible to us, and I don't think that's a political thing.
The library will be closing in 9 minutes.
Woo! Okay. Lee Harvey Oswald was actually on the second floor of Tom Cole. Did you have them say that? Yeah, that's what he was on the second floor of the school book depository in the cafeteria drinking a Coke. Thank you, everyone, for your tolerance. Bless your heart. Thank you.